Okay guys, you saw the final result at the beginning of the video. First I just want to say thank you to my patrons. If you want to join that, link is in the description below. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started. So to get started with this, we're going to go ahead and go up here to the VFX motion tracking tab so we can actually do some camera tracking. Then we want to go ahead and open up our footage. Now you can actually download my footage, link is in the description below. Once we have this imported, you'll actually know that some of the colors are off, so we're just going to come up here, change the view transform back to standard just so our colors match our actual video. Then we can set the scene frames and also prefetch the footage. So now if we scrub through our clip, we can see that it has a smooth playback, and we can actually see the start and end keyframes. So I actually want to have the UFO come in on frame 72. I don't want it to come in on frame 1. So let's just go ahead and set it to the start frame to 72. So that is looking good. Now we can actually go ahead and start camera tracking. Before I do that, let's just hold control and then click to make sure that our size is good. You can also hit Alt S to reveal the search area. So that is looking good, so we don't need to change around with any of the settings over here. We do want to make sure that normalize is checked, and then in the tracking settings extra, I always like to set it to a 0.9 correlation. So now that we have that out of the way, we can go ahead and detect some features. That'll have Blender automatically detect some points in our footage. I'm just going to set this threshold down to a 0.01 and the distance down to an 80, just so we have more tracking dots in our scene. And then we can go ahead and hold control and press T to start tracking. So now you'll notice that we have this green line down here, and these are basically all the tracking dots in a graph form. So that is looking good. We can also come up here and hold Alt and hit D to hide all of the tracking markers that have lost its actual tracking. So if we come throughout here, we can see that some actually made it to the end, near the end of our clip, so that is good. I'm going to come to a point where some of them are lost, so I think around here. And then I'm just going to do the same detect features and hold control and hit T to start tracking. Okay, so my second set of tracking markers has finished. You will notice that we lose some over here. So basically, we're going to keep repeating these steps until we have a lot of tracker markers all throughout our clip. Okay, so I did some more sets of tracking markers, and now I have a lot of tracking markers actually throughout our clip, so that is looking good. We can actually come down here to this graph now and see all of the tracking markers that kind of go haywire. So basically, we're looking for any spikes like this that happen, so we just want to go ahead and delete all of these that kind of have the spikes and everything. These are basically just tracking markers that go a little haywire and don't stay tracked to a specific point. Okay, so I have cleaned up our bottom here a little bit. You can see that we no longer have any tracking markers that go crazily above or below the usual line. You can see that they all kind of stick together, and so that is what we're looking for. We can go ahead and bring this down. Next, we can actually go ahead and solve our camera motion. So if we come over here to the solve panel, we can actually hit keyframe to let Blender pick the A and B keyframe. And then the refine button, we're going to choose focal length K1 and K2. This is basically just Blender trying to guess what your camera settings are. And so now that we have that, we can actually come down here and solve the camera motion. Okay, so I just got my solve error. I got a 0.44. Now you want to try to get that as low as possible. I recommend below a 0.3 if you can. So what I'm actually going to do is come over here, do a clean track. Then I'm going to set this reprojection error to be, let's say for now, let's do a 1.5. And then we're just going to go ahead and delete all of those tracks. Let's actually unhide some of the tracks just so we can see them all. And let's do that again. So let's go up until we get just a few right here and delete those. And now let's solve the camera motion again. One thing I forgot to mention before you actually solve the camera motion again, you do want to make sure you uncheck the keyframe button because Blender has already found the A and B keyframe, so we don't need it to find it again. But as you can see, I got my solve error down to a 0.42. Now I'm actually going to go ahead and clean my tracks one more time. Just keep doing this until you get a pretty good solve error. Okay, I was able to get my solve error down to a 0.39, and that is good enough for me. I'm just going to go ahead and move on to the next step, but you do want to make sure you get that as low as possible. So for our next step, we're just going to come down here in this menu, then set up our tracking scene, and you'll notice over here in this kind of top right window, we can actually see that it's set a cube and a plane along with all of our tracking dots in our scene. So now we actually have the scene open. let's come out to this layout tab just so we can see a bit better. Let's go in the camera view. You'll see that all of our tracking markers are gone. I like seeing them, so you can come up here, then check mark this motion tracking section, and then you can just turn the size of these markers down a little bit, just so you can barely see them like that. So that is looking good. Now there are some things that Blender automatically sets when you do a tracking scene that I don't really like, so let's just go ahead and delete some of those things. First, let's just delete this collection, the background collection, and then it also made a view layer. We don't really need this view layer. And so now if we come into compositing, it also set up some nodes. We actually don't need these nodes. We can just go ahead and delete all of those. I just deleted right there, and then plug this movie clip image into the image of our alpha over. And then while we're at it, let's go ahead and set this to convert to pre-multiply. Okay, so now we are ready to actually start modeling out our UFO and setting it in our scene. So let's go to the layout. Now you will see that our camera is kind of jacked up right now. We really want the UFO to be on the plane, this little grid plane right here. So a way we're just going to do that is to just hit 1 on our numpad and then hold Control Alt 0 to set our camera to be there. So now that it's there, we can actually hit R to rotate it on the Z, and then we can rotate it over just so it's actually facing our grid like that. Okay, so now that we have this set up, we actually don't need the cube, the plane, or the light in our scene, so we can actually just go ahead and delete all of those. So now let's actually add in our UFO object. Now for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to keep it simple since I'm not really a modeler, and we're just going to have a pill-shaped UFO. So let's just size that up however big we want it, and then go into the side view. We can go ahead and go into edit mode by pressing tab, and then go hit this little x-ray view up here. And then basically we just want to box select by clicking and dragging. We just want to select half of that. And then we can hit G to move it on the x-axis. Just move that over here. Let's see how that looks. That is looking good for how we want it. Let's just get out of x-ray. Then we can right click, shade smooth, and also come into the normals and auto smooth like that, just so it's a little more smooth rounded. So here is our UFO. We can see that it actually moves with our camera, and that is looking good. Now we actually want to animate the UFO, it coming in and everything. So first of all, let's actually set the UFO to be up here. I want the UFO to basically come in here and then kind of do a little sweeping run down here. So let's to do that, we're just going to hit G, Z, move it up like that, position it right around here. Then we're going to hit I for a location keyframe, and then basically we're going to come to where I want it to be actually in the view now, and so we're going to have it come right here. I'm also going to rotate it on the Z axis just a little bit like that, and then set another location keyframe. Let's see how that is looking. So that looks pretty good. I do want to move my keyframe over a little bit just to maybe make the timing a little bit more slow. So that is looking good. And then we want to come to the end of our clip real quick where we want the UFO to actually stop in midair. For me, that's going to be around frame 410. So we're just going to hit G, Shift Z to move in every axis but the Z axis. Just kind of position this right here. If you notice this right here, this is actually clipping, so we can actually change that around a bit. Let's just quickly hit I to set another location keyframe. Now there are two types of clipping. There are the camera clipping and then the viewport clipping. Viewport clipping you can actually change by coming up to the view up here. Just by you can bring up this menu over here by hitting N on your keyboard, and then we want to set the clip in. We're just gonna drag that out a bit. So that actually didn't change anything because this is actually camera clipping. So we need to select the camera down here, go into the camera properties, and right here we can see the clip start and end. We just want to increase that a bit. So now let's select our UFO object again. Let's see its little animation. So for any reason, if your playback on your actual camera is a bit slow, that's actually because of the background image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and disable that for now, just so we have smoother playback like this. Now let's actually play around a little bit more with the animation. I'm going to make this keyframe go down a little bit, set another location keyframe, and then right here I'm going to make a keyframe right here where the UFO actually goes down a tad bit more, just so we have a nice natural curve. So that is looking good. It kind of stops here, and then we want it to dart up. So what I'm going to do is hit go to a frame after our last frame, and then I'm going to hit Z to move it up, and just move it up here out of the way. And then just going to hit I and location keyframe again. Let's see how that looks. Okay, so here is what we have right now. We have the UFO just coming down, slowly stopping, and then darting back up. Let's actually go ahead and turn the background images on just to see where everything is. Yep, everything is looking good. Now, all we have to do now is actually do some material work and some lighting for our scene. Let's actually set the end keyframe to be where the UFO actually leaves the camera, because we don't really need to render anything after that. So for me, that frame is going to be 417. So let's just come down here, hit 417 like that. So that is looking good. Now let's actually go into the rendered view, just so we can see some of the materials that we're working with. You can see that we actually don't have shading in the scene right now. So let's go to the shading tab, go to the world shading. Let's add in a HDRI by adding in a environment texture. Plug that there, and then we can download this HDRI. I downloaded it from HDRI Haven. So already you can see that brings in some lighting for our scene. I'm actually going to increase the strength just a tad like that, so that is looking good now. We do see that we can actually see some of the background, so to change that, we're going to come to the render properties, down to film, and then make sure that transparent is turned on. Now we don't actually have anything in the background, it's all going to be transparent. Now let's shade our little UFO a bit. Let's go to object, select our UFO. Let's just name this UFO right here. Then I'm just going to play around with some of the properties in this principled BSDF. I kind of want the UFO to be a little bit shiny, so I'm going to do a clear coat first. Just give it a little bit of a shine like that, and then maybe make the specular, increase that a bit, maybe decrease the roughness. Something like that. That looks pretty good in what I was going for. Then next, I do want to add a subdivision surface modifier, just real quick to smooth out the some of the edges and stuff. So that is also looking good. So now I believe we are actually ready to render out our animation. If we come up to the compositing tab, we actually just want to render out the UFO and nothing else. So if we plug this into the composite, that'll give us the result we're going for. Let's go and render out an image to see what we have. So here is what we want. We just want the UFO in the shot, and then you can see we have a transparent background. So that is what we're looking for. Let's actually come down. We want to make sure that ambient occlusion, bloom, screen space reflections, and motion blur is on. This will just add some realism to our scene. And then in the color management, make sure that the view transform is on filmic instead of standard. This will just make the colors more vivid. Okay, finally we just have to set up some output settings. Let's come down here, make sure that your resolution and frame rate are correct, which they are. And then I'm just going to go ahead and make a new folder for all of our images to go into. I name mine image sequence, so let's just hit accept there. Make sure it's on PNG, RGBA, and then the compression you can change down to 0%. Now we are actually ready to render our animation, so let's go up here and render the animation. Okay, so my animation finished rendering. Let's just go ahead and close this out. Now we can actually go ahead and get rid of this render layers node since we don't need it anymore. Just drop in a image node. Then we're just going to go ahead and open up all of our images that we just created. You can just select A to select all those. So you can actually come down here and see that it has automatically set a image sequence right here, and it tells you the frame count. We will notice that the start frame is off, however. We can come down here and see that our start frame is 72, so we need to go ahead and change that to be the same frame. Next, let's just plug this image into the image node right here. Next, we need to come down here and actually set our start and end keyframes to be back to their original values. Mine was starting at 1. Then ending at 605 like that. So now that is looking good. Let's actually zoom out by hitting V just so we can see kind of what this is looking like right now. So we can see that we have our image sequence overlaid on top of our actual movie clip, and everything is looking good. The colors are off, however. Let's go to change that just real quick, set this back to standard. That is looking better. So now we actually want to have the trees cut off the UFO, so it looks like the UFO is behind our trees, and so that is actually very nice. When I was filming, I made sure that the day was very overcast, so we have this nice blank gray sky that is going to help us a lot. So let's just go ahead and get into that. First, we want to drop in a luminance key. Luminance key basically takes the luminance of each pixel, and if the luminance is too high or too low, it will make it transparent or opaque. So let's just drop the image of the movie clip into that. Then let's just hold Shift and Control and then click to view what that looks like. So you can see that it's basically changed our movie clip from black to white, but what it's actually doing is taking all of the brighter values and leaving them to be white and all the darker values to be black. So let's just play around with this high and low value so that only our sky is white and everything else is black. So I'm just going to pull this down here and then maybe bring the low up a bit. Let's see how this looks. And so that is looking pretty good. I'm actually just going to increase this a tad. Just so we can get some of these branches. They're looking kind of skinny. Okay, so that is looking good for me. Now we can just go ahead and plug this matte into the factor of our alpha over, and let's give that a view. So you can see right away that it's done the effect that we want. If we go ahead and zoom in a bit, you will notice that our branches are looking kind of weird right here. So a way I like to change that is to actually bring this over here. And then I'm going to add in a quick blur node. Just bring that between the luminance key and the alpha over, and then we're just going to leave it on Gaussian and change the blur amount for the X and Y up to 2. This kind of gets rid of some of it. If it is still kind of noticeable for any reason, you just want to play around with this high and low until that goes away. So now if we come through our clip, let's just make sure that everything is actually in front of our ship and that our ship is in the back. So just scrubbing throughout here, everything is looking good. Now you could actually blur this a little bit more and do some other stuff to kind of refine some of these edges, but for the sake of this tutorial, I think that looks pretty good. So now let's get into our final part, and that is going to be actually matching this to the color of our scene. So to do this, first I'm going to add in a color balance node. Just going to type in color balance, bring that between the actual image sequence and the alpha over node. Then we can just play around with these little values in the middle. I'm going to set my gamma up a bit, maybe have the lift go up a bit, and then finally the gain. Let's see how that looks with it up. That looks okay. Let's do it a little bit lower. Okay, so that is looking good. Let's go throughout this, just see how it looks. Okay, so that is looking pretty good. Last thing I'm going to do is just add in a overall gamma node to this. And let's decrease that just a tad. So that is looking good. That's what I'm going to stick with. Now you can do a lot more, but for the sake of mine, I just needed to mess around with some of the gamma and the lift and the gain. Okay, so now that I'm happy with that, we just have to make sure that our final alpha over is connected up to our composite node. Then let's play around with some of the output settings again. I'm going to choose a new location for my video file. Down at the file format, I'm going to change this to FFmpeg video. In the encoding, I'm going to make sure it's MP4, and the output quality I'm going to set to high. And finally, we are ready to render out our final animation. Okay guys, so here is the final result. I think it turned out pretty nicely, just like a little fake UFO sighting type thing. Now there are plenty of other things I could do to actually perfect this, to actually fool some people, but this was kind of just a fun little side project I thought we could do. But anyways guys, let me know what you thought of this tutorial. If there are anything you would do differently, or any suggestions you might have. We're all trying to grow, so I'd love to hear them. But anyways guys, we have a Patreon and Discord. Link to those can be found in the description below. But anyways guys, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys later. Peace.